The American Chess Cup 2025 ended in a 9-round Blitz tournament featuring all top American grandmasters plus other invited guests. Let's take a look at the highlights. In this position, Fabiano Caruana, one of the top American grandmasters, is playing black against Russian grandmaster Mikhail Antipov. This is a theoretical draw position, but Antipov, playing white, and he is without a pawn in a rook endgame, finds a way to finish the game in a draw in one move. Just imagine for a second, it's white to move, and let's say they don't have this rook on e6. The king doesn't have any moves, and it's not under attack, so that would be a stalemate, and that's the idea that Antipov is using with his next brilliant move. Rook takes b6. He sacrifices the rook, and now after Caruana takes rook takes b6, white has no moves, it's a stalemate, it's a draw. Next game I want to show you is, again, Mikhail Antipov, Russian grandmaster, against one of the top American grandmasters, Sam Sevian. This is the position on the board after move 52. It's black to move. It's even position. White is without a pawn, but much more active pieces. Sevian plays a rook d7, thinking that after exchanging of the rooks on d7, the position will remain even, and he would be able to draw this game. But what he didn't expect, with 5 seconds to go in the game, with 5 seconds remaining, Mikhail Antipov finds a beautiful sacrifice of the rook. A rook takes e6. What an epic move by Antipov. Queen takes e6, and the sacrifices didn't end there. Even more brilliant move. A rook takes f6, sacrificing another rook on f6. And now, if pawn takes f6, then Sevian loses a queen on e6. If queen takes g4, we have a beautiful checkmate. Rook takes h6 checkmate, using the fact that the pawn on g7 is pinned. So this was a really beautiful combination by Antipov, and he won this game. The next game I want to show you is ARONIAN, another top grandmaster, originally from Armenia, now living in the United States, playing against Mikhail Antipov again. Mikhail Antipov is really the highlight of this video. This is the position where ARONIAN on move 34 has an extra knight. An extra knight for 2 pawns, and considered a favorite to win this game simply because an extra knight is an extra knight. And he grabs the point on d6. He didn't realize what will come next. Antipov plays a rook takes d2, sacrificing the rook on a square d2. Rook takes d2, knight e3 check, and now the king has to go to g3 to protect the queen on f3, because the queen that's hidden on a square a8 would just capture the queen on f3. So the moves like king g1 will not work, because queen will take on f3. So king g3, now knight f1 check, and that's a fork. King goes to g2, exchange of the queens on f3, knight takes d2 with the check, and that's another fork. And after king goes to e2, Antipov grabs the pawn on b3 and has a winning endgame with 2 extra pawns. And not only there are 2 extra pawns, but they're connecting passing pawns, and he easily converted this endgame and won the game. Next up, Samuel Sevian against Hikaru Nakamura. This is the position of on the board. White is very active. They have a very nice knight on square f5. They have some pressure on the black king, but the position is still fine for Nakamura until he makes a mistake and put his bishop on a square f7 and gets a nice sacrifice in response from Savian. Knight takes g7. Brilliant move, sacrificing the knight. And what happens if Nakamura takes the knight with the king? The continuation would be knight a5 check, king g8, queen takes h6 with ideas of a checkmate on g7. The only move to protect would be bishop f8, queen takes f6, and this is a totally winning position for white, with pawns g and h smashing the black's king's position. Therefore, Nakamura didn't take the knight on g7, played bishop f8, and after a series of moves that I'm going to present you quickly, queen a2 for Nakamura. He creates some counter chances, threatening the pawn on c2, but Savian defends that pawn with the rook c1, and after rook d7, bishop takes f6, rook e8, queen f2, Nakamura plays queen a3, and all of a sudden it turns out that after rook a1, Nakamura has to resign because the queen on a3 is trapped. It has no moves and it's gonna be lost. It has no moves because this beautiful bishop on a long diagonal controls all black squares and the queen is trapped. Finally, I want to show you the best game, in my opinion, of this tournament and the game that decided the winner of the tournament. White pieces belong to Mikhail Antipov again, Russian Grandmaster, and Hikaru Nakamura plays black. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d3, two knights variation, Jacobiana, slow, positional game, starting with the move d3, bishop e7, a4, preventing black from playing a6, b5 in the future. Castle for Nakamura, Antipov develops the knight to c3, d6, opening the diagonal for the light square bishop for black, a5. Why not? Antipov decides to push the pawn forward, because Nakamura doesn't really block it in any way with the move a5, which was possible in the previous position, bishop e6 and a6. The pawn marches forward. b6 for Nakamura, knight jumps to a nice outpost on d5, and queen c8. Queen c8 with the same idea as Nakamura had in the Blitz games against Caruana in the main portion of the tournament. When he goes queen c8, then the bishop retreats to d8 and the knight from c6 moves to e7. So this is the idea of the move queen c8, c3, preparing the move d4 to put pressure on the black pieces in the center. Right now it's not possible because the knight will capture the pawn on e4. Bishop goes to d8, castle for white, rook b8, rook e1 to protect the pawn on e4, and now white already can play d4, h6 and d4. The pawn on e4 is protected. Bishop g4 for Nakamura, he pins the knight and now threatens to take the pawn on d4 using the pin. Bishop b5, that's a very nice move by Antipov, and now it turns out that white's position is becoming a lot more pleasant. Knight takes d5, e takes d5, and knight goes to e7, all according to the plan when the bishop moved to d8. Take the pawn on, exchange the pawns on e5, h3 attacking the bishop, and now if the bishop goes to h5, retreats to h5, then g4 attacking that bishop, and after bishop g6, the knight would simply take the pawn on e5, white would have a winning position. Therefore, black takes the knight on f3, queen takes f3, and knight g6, protecting the pawn on e5. White's position is considerably better here, and Nakamura said after the game he thinks that this whole game was very much preparation, home preparation by Antipov. And at least until move 20 or so, he knew exactly what to do, and he had that position prepared. Queen h5, possibly in some variations threatening to sacrifice the bishop on h6. Therefore, king h7 pretty much eliminates that idea, but after bishop d3, now it turns out that the knight on g6 is very unpleasantly pinned and cannot get into the game so easily. So therefore, f5, blocking the white bishop. And now the winning move for white in this position was g4, using the pin, because now black cannot take the pawn on g4, because white would simply take on g6 and win a knight. And some potential continuation could be e4. And here white had a beautiful sacrifice of the rook. Rook takes e4, f takes e4, bishop takes e4, and it turns out that it's almost impossible to protect that knight on g6. Another continuation could be rook f6 to protect the knight, but then it would be followed by bishop g5 using the pin, attacking the rook, and after rook goes to d6, still protecting the knight on g6, then simply bishop f4, rook f6, and bishop e5 again, attacking the rook. Now the rook cannot go anywhere on the 6th rank, so either the rook or the knight on g6 would be captured, and white would easily win the game. Antipov didn't see this idea and played. Let's return to this position. After f5, he played f3. That was a pretty passive move, and immediately Caruana had some chances. And I called him Caruana, and I apologize, Nakamura. g4, e4. Starting to get some counterplay in the middle, in the center of the board. Exchange of the pawns on e4, and knight jumps to e5, attacking the bishop on d3. Black position is still worse, but at least it's more active, and when you are down in material, when your position is worse, all you need to do is create some counter chances and create some complications in the position, so your opponent, especially under a time pressure, because this is a blitz game, could make some mistakes. Bishop e2. Bishop e2 was important to protect the square f3 from the knight jumping there and forking the king and the rook. Queen d6, g takes f5, c6, threatening to take the pawn on d5, undermining white center, which looks really strong right now. King g2 and bishop c7. And again, counter chances created, with possibility of knight jumping out of this battery and the queen penetrating into the white castle in the squares g3 or h2. Antipov plays a logical move, bishop f4, blocking that battery. Nakamura takes the pawn on d5, and now another good move by Antipov, rook d1. Because if he just took the pawn with the pawn, then queen would take the pawn with the check, and black would have a very good position. But rook d1 prevents this from happening, and after queen e7, Antipov takes the pawn with the rook and have an absolutely winning position. Rook d8, doubling down the rook, rook d1, exchanging of the rooks on d5, knight goes to f7, and queen g6 check, king h8, and queen e6. Black should not take the queen on e6, because after pawn takes f6, let's take a look at this variation. Queen takes e6, pawn takes e6, attacking the knight, and let's say if bishop hits on f4, then we have a very good move, bishop h5. Bishop h5 is the winning move, because now if the knight moves away, then we simply have e7 and e8 and black Nakamura would have to sacrifice the rook for that pawn that would become a queen. That was a nice combination. Nakamura probably saw it and played queen h4. Now the bishop on f4 is under attack, and actually Antipov takes the bishop on c7. And he has a position where he has an extra bishop, and he has two extra pawns. And seemingly nothing can go wrong here, but he's playing against one of the best ever Blitz players, Hikaru Nakamura, who can create chances out of nothing. Knight g5, attacking the queen and attacking the pawn on h3. That's already something. Antipov plays queen d6, gets a check on h3, removes the king to g1, gets another check on e3, king f1, queen h3. And in this position, both players could repeat the moves. They both had 5 seconds remaining on the clock. So the game could end in a draw like that, with move repetition. But Antipov, to his credit, despite the fact that he is playing against one of the best, he knows that his position is totally winning, and it is. And he plays king e1. King e1. So he continues the game, trying to win the game. Queen h1 check. And now it's important that the king cannot go to d2, because in response it would be knight takes e4 check and forking the king and winning the queen. Therefore bishop f1, rook e8, rook e8. And here the best move for white was queen c6, but it was very difficult to find, I'm sure, in the time scramble. The easier way to continue with the big advantage was just to move the pawn forward e5. Antipov didn't do either of those things. He played rook d4, which immediately lost all his advantage after the move knight e4. And now black have a lot of different threats. They're threatening to take the queen. They're threatening with all sorts of discovery checks. Antipov plays queen g6, knight f6, check by the rook, king f2, knight e4, king e1, and this is another position where both players could agree to a draw by just repeating the moves. And they did repeat the moves several times until Antipov again decided to play for the win and took the knight on e4. He sacrificed the rook. This position is still very much winning for white, but in a game with a classical time control. In a time scramble, in a blitz game, this position is not so easy. Yes, two bishops are stronger than a rook, but the king is really insecure on a square f2. Bishop d6, check from e3, king g2, another check. King goes to h2, another check from h4. King goes to g1, and this position already even because of the move rook e4. And the threat is to play rook to g4 with the check and winning the queen. And here Antipov plays bishop g2. Queen e1 check, bishop f1 blocking the check, queen goes back to h4, bishop goes to g3. Rook g4. Rook g4 with the threat to take the queen, first of all. Another threat is to take the bishop with the queen and checkmate white on a square g1. And here only one move was saving white from losing this game. Only one move. Antipov didn't find it. The move itself is not so difficult. It's queen e8 check. What's difficult is the next move. After king goes to h7, the next move that saves the game is sacrificing the queen. Queen G6 check. Pretty amazing move. And now it turns out that if you take the queen with the rook, then we take that rook with the check. And the next move, we take the queen on h4 and easily win this position. So the only way to continue for black would be to go back with the king, and there would be a 3-move repetition and a draw. Instead, after rook g4, again being under a tremendous time pressure, on tip of plate king f2, and lost the game on the spot. After queen takes g3 check, he resigned because it's a check, king has to move away, and the next move, Nakamura would just simply capture the queen. So Nakamura really escaped an absolutely losing position, and he is a master of doing that. He won this game and won the tournament and won $5,000 for winning this Blitz tournament. If you like this video, I would appreciate if you subscribe, like, and thank you for watching.